Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Wolverine.com postgame show. I am your host, Anthony Broome, along here with former Michigan defensive lineman Ryan Van Bergen. We are here after a 28-18 Michigan victory over Arkansas State to close out non-conference play. And I think the best way to put it would be, I thought defensively, Michigan more or less handled its business. The backups came in late in the game, and Arkansas State puts together a few drives. But offensively, I think you leave this game feeling pretty good about your run game. I think you leave this game seeing some better things up front on the offensive line. The quarterback situation hangs over this team like a cloud right now. And it kind of, the way that this schedule sets up, where every 2 weeks or so is one of these showdown, litmus test type of games. You leave non-conference play with more questions than answers at the quarterback position. Ryan Van Bergen, before we get into the show, your initial thoughts on this game, as a whole.
I'm glad we came away with a win, and I feel like it's tough to be optimistic about how this team's going to look moving forward with what we've seen through the first 3 weeks. There were some positives from today. I do think the offensive line kind of got some rhythm in the second half, and our running game got a little bit of rhythm in the second half. Defensively, we did a job. I don't know how well we did it, but we did a job. And my thoughts are kind of coming now to the realization that we have fallen from the top of the mountain a little bit in terms of the talent level we have on the field, in terms of coaches that are familiar with who they have as their players and what they want to do with those players. And my expectations are now tempered. I feel like each week's going to be a new test, like you said, and see where we can grow, where we can develop. And I feel like we found a few things this game. Was it enough? No, but there was some glimpses of an identity offensively, and defensively we played decent. And I hope we can get up for USC, because I think USC is going to be a huge test. I think we talk about each week being a test. This is a big one coming up, and we need to show that we can be competitive in order to inspire some hope into this season, I think.
Again, this is what happens when I do stuff live. We will get through the offensive takeaways, the defensive takeaways. We'll hand out some game balls, as we tend to do each week. And then, like we do on every post-game show, we will do a Q&A segment as well. Before we do that, I want to shout out our sponsors for today's show over at myperfectfranchise.net. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Wanting to diversify, build wealth, and more? Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner that helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time commitment, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. So head on over to myperfectfranchise.net. You can call him at 404-973-9901. Email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. And Andy, thank you for your support of the Wolverine podcast. All right, I think the only way to start this game is on the offensive side of the ball. Michigan, I think we were looking for them to build some sort of identity, something to get back to in terms of hanging your hat on. And when it comes to the run game, they did exactly that. Ran for 301 yards. Khalil Mullings, 15 carries, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns. Donovan Edwards, I thought, played really well today. 17 carries, 182 yards, and a touchdown. And we can talk about that dynamic and how those carries should be doled out. But it's clear, I've said it all off season long. This is a 1A and 1B backfield. I think that there's a place and a space for both of them to make a lot of plays in this offense. And they're going to have to shoulder this offense because the quarterback situation. I think you walk out of this week less sure than maybe you were heading into the first game of the season, second game of the season. Davis Warren, to his credit, the ball didn't touch the ground today. Unfortunately, his only 3 incompletions were 3 interceptions, gimmies to Arkansas State. At one point in this first half, he had thrown the pick in the first quarter, and mistakes happen, and I get it. You're driving to go up 28-3, which going into the half up 28-3, I think would have been something that a lot of people would have been super happy about in terms of, again, talking about things, building an identity, developing in the passing game, finding something to hang your hat on. He would wind up throwing interception there, and he comes out and throw an interception in the third quarter as well. And, it just gets to a point where when you throw 6 picks in the first 2 weeks of the season, you have to make some kind of change. Now it's Orji came in the game. Sherrone Moore says managed the game well. He was 2 of 4 for 12 yards, a passing touchdown to Hogan Hansen. But this quarterback, you're kind of back to square one with the Davis Warren, Alex Orji conversation heading into, again, another huge game with USC on the docket next week.
I thought that our offense would have a little bit more to it by week 3, week 4. And I think it's a reasonable expectation, would definitely have more sorted in terms of the quarterback position. There were some glimpses of Davis Warren today, and that have been there, I think, through the first 2 weeks, where he steps up in the pocket, has great posture, finds a good throw, makes a good throw. The problem is I feel like it's almost always his first read, and he's received some justified criticism that when there's pressure, he likes to throw off his back foot. And I think those things are the things that continue to come up. You make those mistakes week 1, you learn from those mistakes, you don't do it again, you don't repeat. That's what makes you a good player. If you repeat the same mistakes, it's really hard to maintain your position and become someone that leads your team to repeat mistakes. And that's, unfortunately, I feel like part of what you're seeing with Davis Warren. And personally, I'm still not pressing the panic button entirely, but there's part of me that's starting to get really concerned that haven't seen too much mixing of the offensive line to see if there's other guys that can get in and make this offensive line a little bit more consistent. Specifically, as I was watching the game today, I feel like center, right guard, right side of our line, Link, all across the board, that side is much less productive for us in the run game than the left side. And I feel like that's one area that we've noticed that has had an issue, and I've been waiting, with Sherrone Moore being an offensive line guy, to see a shuffle, to see someone else come in, try some other things. We ran another offensive lineman in today in the absence of Colston Loveland, which hopefully he's okay. But I just feel like I'm concerned that there's a lack of creativity and a lack of shuffling to try to get better production out of that position. It played well, but we played Arkansas State. We should have ran for 300 yards. We should have ran for more. And the pressure that they got, to me, it was a very lackluster D grade performance from the offense. And I don't see the ability to score A's and B's with how we're currently running it.
Yeah, I think something with the offensive line too is that I think there's room for. This is what I'm confused about, is that Evan Link has a bright future at right tackle. However, the future does not look like it's now for him. They can't pass protect. That's a huge issue. That leads to happy feet from the quarterback. That leads to mistakes. And, Davis Warren's the quarterback. You have to take care of the football. And if you don't, there's a price to be paid for that. And that could mean losing your job. It meant another quarterback finished out this game for them. Something that confused me is that the best 2 drives that they had in the first half of this game had Greg Crippen at center. And then you go back to Dom Jadis, and it just wasn't, that extra gear wasn't there. I don't know what, I know Andrew Gentry was involved in the battle for the right tackle job. Saw him a little bit today as like a 6th offensive lineman. Looks a little bit stiff, to be honest with you, but, they helped out Link a little bit on the right side with him as an extra blocker. I don't know that their best 5 is out there yet. Now, again, you're right. Left side, Miles Hinton has played really well. I think Josh Preeb, you've hardly heard his name this season. That right side of the line, from center to right tackle, it's kind of a mess at the moment. And if you don't get that ironed out, it's not going to matter if Davis Warren is back there. It's not going to matter if Alex Orji's back there. Everyone in the comments wants to see Jaden Davis get a shot. It's not going to matter if especially not going to matter if he's a true freshman out there and you can't protect. So to me, I mean, this offensive line and Sherrone has to wear this because in the lead up to the season, he says, as long as I'm at Michigan, we will be good on the offensive line. And through the first few weeks, as a whole, I haven't seen that yet.
That's my biggest concern. I think offensively, we've got issues all over the place, but it's almost one of those things that, all right, when you have this much stuff going on, what's the first domino? What domino tips over the rest of them and makes the other parts not go? And as I watch today's game and a few of the other games, I feel like that's a very big issue for us is our right side A gap, right side B gap with center guard, guard tackle. That's a vulnerability for us that is consistent and being exploited consistently, making other things tough. The other thing that I feel like is just not helping us is right now, I think we're having some technical difficulties, but if you can hear me, I'll keep talking. Right now, I feel like our only option in passing game is quick game because we have an inability to protect the quarterback. So we consistently are going out and getting ourselves behind the chains in certain situations. And then on third down, third and long, the only options we have are 6-yard routes, 8-yard routes, 10-yard routes, and majority of those going to Colston Loveland. So without any consistency that we can find with our pass protection, again, in the offensive line, I don't know how we're going to develop the passing game, which we all know is non-existent. So there's so much to figure out. But for me, like you said, with Sherrone Moore as the offensive line coach and having kind of hung his hat on the fact that offensive line is going to be the consistent heart of this team, we've got to see some better offensive line play. And if we're not going to see it from the guys that we have in currently, we're going to have to see hopefully some development of some of the guys that we've brought in. I think we're still having some difficulties on Anthony's end. There he is. We've got video, but no audio. Still got no audio, but your video's working just fine there, Anthony. Got your audio. He can see me, but we can't hear him. No audio from Anthony just yet. But I'm not qualified to run this by myself, but I can look into some of the comments that we've had and talk a little bit more. I mean, offensively, highlights. We should talk about some of the positives. Highlights. Hello. Offensively. There he is.
That's what happens when we do stuff live and Wi-Fi is all over the place, but I'm back. I don't know where we were when I out. So
what we said,
keep on rolling through, I guess.
What I said was that the right side not helping in the offensive line and not having the running game going has also been a liability in passing, which to me, it's tough to even evaluate. Do we have receivers that can make plays? Do we have the ability to have a passing game if Davis Warren is protected? Those are all hypothetical based on the play of the offensive line. And then on the positive side, Colston Loveland, when healthy, if healthy, looks good. And I do think the running backs look good, but I'm still standing on my soapbox screaming to please use Khalil Mullings more between tackles and runs that are that style more downhill and get Donovan Edwards the pitch power and the things that go outside. Because that's another thing that I feel like we saw today that got some traction is we're not very good at zone blocking in the offensive line. That's all the way across the board. But when we do gap scheme where we have guys block down and pull around, we're a little bit more effective. So I feel like Mullings is better for that power type game, gap game, and then you got Edwards for the outside zone game. And I feel like that would help put us in positions to be more successful. But, those are really searching for some positives from an offense that to me is just sputtering 3 weeks in.
Going to read a couple super chats here from our YouTube viewers. Chandler Ellis for $5 says, I see at least 4 more losses this year. We compare ourselves to Ohio State, but this would never be tolerated there. No QB, no OC, bad wide receiver coach. And, again, I don't think it's any one thing right now. I think offensively, their issues have been systemic from top to bottom. I mean, this is, we've talked about this before too. When you go a couple recruiting cycles where you take a project at quarterback in Alex Orji and a guy that really hasn't shown a ton in Jaden Denegal, these 3-star, fringe 4-star type of guys, And you go into this offseason without a clear successor to JJ McCarthy at quarterback. I mean, that's something Sherrone has to wear. That's something Kirk Campbell has to wear. You know, those guys spoke with and acted with a ton of conviction in how they went about the quarterback situation. And, you know, again, I know the timing was weird. You weren't sure what JJ McCarthy was going to do. Certainly, like I keep saying, you know, you're not going to apologize for your season going longer than everyone else's did. But right now, I mean, they're in a tough spot at quarterback. And, you know, I don't think it's as simple as just throwing Jaden Davis in there, throwing, you know, everyone loves the backup quarterback at Michigan, but throwing that guy up there, they've got some serious issues there. And, you know, I'm not going to play the win-loss game right now. Development isn't linear, but, you know, that's 3 weeks in a row where you've seen some good. You can see what you see, and then you see why it might not work. So thoughts on Chandler's take there?
No QB. I think that's fair. That I agree with. Bad OC. I think Kirk Campbell has got to get a little bit more creative. And like I said, finally, I hope I saw and he saw some of the same things, but seeing that our offensive line is more geared towards a gap scheme and that type of man blocking scheme versus being a zone run team, and find where we're going to be successful. When I played, I redshirted back when I played with Jake Long and Mike Hart. You know, Michigan, I think 65% of the plays called in the huddle were just called zone left. That's it. Zone left. Hand the ball to Mike Hart, go behind Jake Long. That's the offense. And I feel like we have tried a couple things to see where can we have a bread and butter. Is it going to be this zone read type of look and then a bubble to Samaj? Is it going to be an inside trap and then we go to this play action? What's the bread and butter going to be? And I feel like we finally found a little bit with that man blocking scheme. We finally found a little bit with Khalil Mullings getting a little bit more of the carries early down. And I feel like we kind of got a little bit of that. Receiver coach, to me, I've got to blame the passing game coordinator, or if that's Kirk Campbell again, but tell me a time today where you saw a Michigan receiver try to make a catch, you know, outside the hashes, beyond the sticks. We don't attack down the field. There's no opportunities for the receivers. And I agree that physically we don't have a specimen that stands out to you that looks like some freak show Calvin Johnson out there. But even if we did, would he get the ball in the way that we're playing our offense? And to me, that's something that is a concern. Is I'm all here for development. Let's give these guys a full year, regardless of how this goes. I'm kind of saying that early, but regardless of how the season may go, give them a full year, let them get into the transfer portal at the right time, fill some of the gaps that they can see, and see what happens. But my concern is the way we're playing football right now, especially offensively. Who is going to come play football at Michigan? And to me, that is something that we've got to start considering, because as vanilla as our offense is, we've got to at least take attempts down the field and try to stretch it out and give our offense some breathing room to run the football. The lack of shots down the field, and I can go on and on about why we're not doing it, but we've got to develop something, because every team has got packages that go down the field with the ball.
I'm going to read this one from King Bronco only because he spent his hard-earned money, but I don't really have anything to say to it. He says, y'all lied to us. We were promised elite, and what we ain't it, Chief. Orgy, the next Cam Newton. I never said that, first of all. Y'all and Trevor McCurr is cluelessness. I don't know if that's English or not, but I figured I'd read it since person paid their money for it. Do we have any other thoughts on offense? This is a team you should have run on. Again, like you said earlier, you expect that. That was sort of the recipe was there for them to get right in that area of the game. But any other takeaways? I mean, next week is going to be a firefight. Can this team do anything to hang in a game like that with USC?
To me, the one thing that you have to do, regardless of what you may produce offensively, is you cannot give the football away. The turnovers are unacceptable through any standard that the program has ever held. Even in a down year, we want to take care of the football and not be careless with the football. And I guarantee you it's going to be a tough game for us to compete with USC this year. It was going to be a tough game before we knew that we were going to struggle in some of the areas that we're struggling. But if you give USC 3 turnovers, which is now our average over the last 2 games, and give them good field position with the offense that they have, you're going to get embarrassed at home. And that doesn't happen in the big house. So from this perspective of what can you change now that should make a severe impact on the game, the emphasis on turnovers and taking care of the football and defensively generating turnovers. Turnovers are not in our favor on either side. And to me, that's something that there's no reason aside from effort in coaching and focus and prioritizing it that we can't clean that part of the game up or get better defensively.
All right, well, let's move to the defensive side of the football. That's an area where, I liked this matchup for Michigan because Jalen Raynor, he's a dual threat guy. Guys like that are going to test your discipline. It's going to test your eyes. It's going to test your composure. After I thought, there were areas where, and again, we give Texas their credit last week, like that offense will force you into a lack of composure. But this was a get right game for them too. And outside of, you give up, I think 130 of the 280 yards that you gave up on the day in the fourth quarter with your second, third, fourth team guys out there. 25 carries, 58 yards. At one point in the fourth quarter, Michigan had not allowed a rushing yard on the day. I want to give those guys a lot of credit because I thought, outside of some, bad penalties, the Quentin Johnson penalty, the late hit out of bounds I expect more from a 6-year guy. A couple miscues here and there. Jair Hill still kind of drinking from the fire hose out there, but the defense did what they were supposed to do against a team that you're supposed to outman and outgun, and it was a step back in the right direction this week.
It was a step back in the right direction, but it also still, just like you've eloquently put it, brought more questions and concerns than it did answers. Because one, I got to give credit to, can't remember their quarterback's name, but going in against Will Johnson and throwing at Will Johnson and testing him repeatedly, I thought he, showed some brass, whats. And I thought on the other end, if you had to say someone that was struggling today, I think Jair Hill probably is that guy. And that's one position I feel like they've gone over now at least 2 weeks in a row. Fresno State may have even tempted that area over there a little bit, but the corner opposite of Will Johnson is going to obviously be tested. And right now, Jair Hill, I don't think has responded in a way that he would like to have responded. And he hasn't played terrible, but there have been some mishaps, miscues, out of positions, and balls that have been caught his way or thrown his way that he should be able to make plays on that he hasn't been there. So I think that's something to look at. I think behind him, Amir, I think that's his name, Amir Hall, has played well and should get a look maybe at that position. And then the front seven, I think, deserves some credit, played well against the run, but our passing defense is something that is got me concerned, especially going against a USC team where Lincoln Riley's going to have that passing game humming. So I feel like teams can get 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s. We were, I was seeing a graphic statistically that we're one of the worst in college football on 3rd down as of the start of this week. Probably improved a little bit, but overall, I feel like our coverage is not as tight and not as secure as it has been under different DCs. So I think Martindale and whoever replaced Klink has got to really step up and start getting to work, because if Will Johnson's the only guy that's going to play tight coverage, we're going to have a long day against the Trojans.
I want to ask you about the defense, just from a perspective of, from these first few weeks of the year, Wink Martindale was hired to kind of keep continuity with what they had been doing the last few seasons. Is what we've seen from the back end of the defense, is that a scheme-based thing? Is it a discipline thing? Is it just simply guys need to play better? Like, what have you diagnosed a spot why that is the way it is?
I feel like we're doing a lot to try to disguise what we're doing, and we're focused so much on disguising what we're doing that we're not locked into what we're supposed to actually do. And I know that might sound a little crazy or ridiculous, but there's times where I feel like today you saw some third downs get converted because guys are zone dropping, but they're dropping to an area where they're supposed to end up, but there's no receiver in that area yet. There's no reason to just go guard grass. Grass can't make the first down. There has to be a receiver that catches the ball to advance it. So guard the guys who can catch the ball is a good defensive coaching scheme point. That's just something that a good coach once said is guard receivers. And when guys do that, you end up in better positions as opposed to just running to a zone and then hoping for the best. I've got some sarcasm in that explanation, but I feel like that's something that we're doing consistently is running to zones and not guarding guys that may or may not fit perfectly into those zones. And I don't know, I don't have the playbooks in front of me. Although Martindale might be the OG of a lot of what Mike McDonald used to do, he may have completely different terminology. There may be a different approach to how he teaches it. As much as the defense and playbook you might think is, just give a guy a playbook, he takes it home to his dorm room, he reads it, he knows it, he comes to practice. That's not how this works. It has to be an educational, foundational understanding of what you're doing, what the guy next to you does, what his job is, why it is that way. And I think we lack a lot of that on defense, especially in the secondary. It seems like guys, alignment-wise, may not be in the right spot on the snap of the ball, and it also seems like maybe they don't have the best communication on motions and certain things like that. So all those things can be relevant when you have a new DC coming in, but it also is reasonable to us to have the expectation that it shouldn't have been like that, considering he kept saying we are same system, same system.
Do you think we may have underrated how big of a loss Rod Moore was? I mean, that's a guy that I know with his injury in the spring, like he's essentially he's a captain. He's a guy that's been a coach on the sideline, but something about what he does, he's a guy that always is lined up where he was supposed to be. He's a guy that, we talked to Lamar Morgan during the defensive backs coach during fall camp, and he just kind of talked about how the best safeties will make everyone around them better. And I'm wondering if a lot of what we've seen back there is because a guy like Rod Moore is not on the field right now.
I think he has a tremendous impact as far as his playmaking ability, but I do think that we have guys back there that should be able to fill the role sufficiently, maybe not into the same degree he plays it, but my concern is that it seems like we are situationally unaware or we don't have a great understanding or grasp of how to execute what we're supposed to do, especially on third down situations. And to me, that's one thing I felt like that you saw a lot of with Mike McDonald's defense is guys that consistently are hand communicating, getting into tighter alignments, changing alignment on snap, getting into a position that makes him more able to make a play. And I just feel like defensively there's some stagnance. There's not a lot of communication. It doesn't seem like everybody's on the same page consistently. And when you're on third down specifically, that to me is like red flag. We've got to get this figured out.
Any other defensive takeaways? I mean, you look at some of the PFF grades from last week, and Jayshon Barham and Ernest Hausman played maybe the worst games of their careers last week against Texas. This week, 7 tackles apiece. Hausman had a sack, tackle for loss. As a team, only 3 tackles for loss on the day. They had the pick for Makari Page in the end zone. They probably should have had a pick earlier in that drive or during that sequence, but 1 sack, not as much disruption as we expected from defensive line. And I thought we'd see more from Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant early in this year. Let's look to the trenches, a place you used to play, a place that Michigan, it's kind of been their bread and butter over these last few years. What are you seeing with those 2 guys on the interior, and does it have a chain reaction on everyone else?
I feel like they're pressing to make plays and trying to make plays, which not always is going to be the best solution to make plays. It puts you in bad positions at times. They're definitely being accounted for. There's no offense that's coming into the big house and not figuring out where number 55 and number 78 are lined up. And that being the case, I feel like it's a very tough position to be in, but you've got to get into a mindset of being aggressive regardless of what you may face, because I do think there's times where in pass pro, they end up with the one-on-one. in a slide protection or in a traditional protection where they were expecting double, so they maybe didn't come off the ball as hard as they would have, or they're expecting double, so they didn't plan a pass rush move or plan to set up in a one-on-one pass rush move. So I feel like defensive tackles, specifically Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, I feel like they've gotten complacent at times in pass rush, and we need to see them show up. With the playmaking ability that they have and the athleticism that they have, they should be a little bit more relevant. But on the counter side, they are getting the ball out really fast in situations like today, and that's because their coverage isn't where it should be and as tight as it could be. And so it's one of those things that it just continues to stack up. The absence of Josiah Stewart is something that surprises me. He had a really big first game, and then I feel like we haven't seen much of him making a presence or making his presence felt. But again, ball's coming out fast. We're not getting a lot of push from the defensive tackle position. So it's there's so many things that all stem from another. And bottom line, we've got to just get better and get better in a hurry, or this season is going to be tough or tougher than we maybe originally anticipated.
All right, the queue is wide open for questions here. Get those in. I got a couple already, but before we get into that, let's hand out some game balls. Again, I know this isn't a victory that anyone's gonna shout from the streets here in Ann Arbor or shout from the rooftops about, but it is still a win. No shortage of standout performances. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball, and I'll give you first crack at it. Who gets your offensive game ball this week?
Offensive game ball goes to Khalil Mullings. I feel like Khalil Mullings has been consistent. He's doing what he's been asked to do. I feel like if put in the right situation, Khalil Mullings, and today he was in the right situation at times, but for an entire game and utilized the right way, I feel like Khalil Mullings is a problem for defenses to try to have to contain. And that's not to take anything away from Donovan, but I love the way he runs the ball, and I like the physicality he brings to the offense. So I'm going with Mullings.
That would be my pick too. I think a guy that gets my game ball for this week would be Edwards. The guys on offense that said, so it's clear that should probably get slightly, but I think Edwards has played these last couple of weeks. He's running hard. It seems like he's taking on contact just a little bit better than he has been before. And today was the best that he's been consistently in a while. And I think that with volume, he's a guy that tends to heat up. So I would not go away from him. I think there's room for both of those guys in this backfield rotation to make an impact. But for us, Mullings and Edwards get the game ball this week. Let's go over to defense. I know you were just kind of critical of them, but of the performances you saw out there today, who gets your game ball there?
I'm giving mine to Will Johnson. I feel like he was consistent and got tested a lot in coverage. And I feel like he's a guy that is usually in the right position. He's aggressive. There's a reason he's a first-round pick. And it's sometimes unfortunate that at corner you can be such a little influence on the rest of your team as far as a leadership and getting other guys lined up. But I feel like he has been challenged in the first 3 weeks, maybe more so than we thought, and responded really well.
I will go with Makari Page for having the interception. Again, I think that someone could have had one earlier on that drive. A couple guys had opportunities with their hands on the ball, but Makari Page caught kind of a gimme in the end zone, so I'll give him a defensive game ball today. Let's move into our Q&A section, and some of them are more just comments that we'll react to, but we'll start with this one from Connor Parks, who says, and I'll say this, we're 3 weeks into a year. Connor asks, are the coaches' jobs in trouble?
I think every coach's job is a hot seat at this point in the landscape of college football. But I think offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators are in a hotter seat than Sherrone Moore. I think Sherrone Moore, we'd have to have a 5-win season. 6-win season before I feel like Sherrone Moore seats get hot. But to me, it's all about progress and making improvements from where we are currently. If we don't see our offense get better and seem to put some sort of identity together, if we don't see our defense get better on third down and generating turnovers, if we don't see progression from our offense or our defense, I think coordinator jobs are likely in jeopardy.
Yeah, again, it's a little premature for me to go that route, but if there's a bottoming out and this looks like, much worse than it should, I'll just put it that way. I'm not going to make that call 3 weeks in, but it's clear. There's not a single aspect of this football team that can't be better, and they're too talented to play the way that they have these first few weeks. So coaches have a lot of work to do as well. This one is from Desmond Williams, who says the question is Michigan capable of beating a team they should not be? They should be Oregon and OSU.
Michigan should be capable of beating these teams, just to me, based on what I think they're capable of defensively. Sorry if I jumped on top of you there, Anthony. You kind of had a breakup, but I feel like Michigan should be able to compete with these teams if they could generate just a generic offense and have their defense play a really solid game. But the way that they've played so far, I don't know that we can compete with top 10 teams if we can't really make some jumps in some different areas, offensively and defensively. I think we might have lost Anthony. Seems like the Wi-Fi might not have the best connection.
Here you go. You got me?
Yep.
Wonky internet here in downtown Ann Arbor today. Question on the screen. Did you address that one, Ryan?
Yes.
All right. I'll just say this. Right now, it doesn't look that way. I think what I've seen on the field these last 3 weeks is a team that's going to win 7 games. If they're lucky, maybe they win 8 games. I think that I'm seeing upward trajectory just about everywhere except for the quarterback position. And I think that they're good enough to get to 8, 9. They really have to take a step forward to get to 10. But, I think there's so much more going on than a lack of talent or guys just not making plays in the field. I have questions about how they're coached right now. And that, forget USC, Texas, Oregon, OSU. You got to play Washington still. Minnesota is going to be a physical team that's not afraid of you. Illinois, same deal, physical team that's not going to be afraid of you. So I don't know right now. It's just kind of week to week at the moment, which is not a place I expected to be with this team, to be honest with you. We'll go to this one from SW Lion 26, who says, with the lack of creativity, I think all quarterbacks will struggle, but Warren had his chance. It's on to Alex Orji. At least Orji has better mobility, which will be needed behind this line. Thoughts on Alex Orji? Like, how do you, if you're on that Michigan coaching staff, how do you approach practice this week?
If it's me, I'm giving Orji a shot. Davis Warren's interceptions today, to me, not only were they bad interceptions, but to me, showed me that he doesn't have the fear of having his job taken. And to me, that's something that, call me old school, but I feel like that's something that any good player, that level of pressure of knowing that, hey, if you don't play and perform to the level that the standard of what your position is, you're going to be sitting next to the coach with a headset on. And to me, that has happened enough to give Orji a shot. Now, you can say all day that, well, Orji can't throw the football. What are we missing? What are we really missing from our offense when we already don't throw the football at any point past the sticks to anyone other than Colston Loveland? So to me, I think giving Orji a chance, coming in there, running an offense that is an extra lineman with lots of shifts, with pulling guys everywhere and try to confuse the defense, I don't see any issue with that being a strategy to at least try to employ. Again, this offense is dying on the table. Hit it with an EpiPen and see what happens.
All right, we'll go to this one from Chad Zolman, who says, what do you guys think of Ben Hall today? I thought he ran hard.
I like him. I mean, I think that we have backs that know that our offensive line can create holes and can create great opportunities. I think a running back university is a great place for Michigan to be right now, but unfortunately, it's a very full room. But it helps to have a existent passing game or an existent passing game to open up that run game, and it's going to be hard to find space if we don't develop a dynamic offense.
Yeah, I like him too. Again, it's just a situation where, if you're giving him extended run, you're taking carries away from Khalil Mullings. You're taking carries away from Donovan Edwards. I think a lot of their efforts need to be towards making sure those guys get the football, as opposed to, even when Jordan Marshall gets back, looping him in there as well. So we do have time for a few more questions. We'll keep going here with Chandler Ellis, which again, I think this conversation is way too premature, but he asked if Sherrone Moore goes 6-6 or 7-5 and you were Ward, would you fire him? I would, because at that point there would be no momentum. I need this team to find a way to win 8 games. I think with all the change, with how young they are on offense, that's the bar. And anything less, I mean, that's at the very least, we're talking major staff changes, because no disrespect to the staff, I have a lot of respect for these guys. I think you have a lot of good football coaches, but from last year's staff, the guys you replaced are it's been a bit of a step down at every single position group. And that includes, Kirk Campbell sliding up a role. That includes your head coach. That includes offensive line coach. So I'm not ready to do that yet, but anything less than 8 wins to me, I think would be eye-opening and demand some pretty major changes and a big financial sort of pledge, both to the coaching staff and to getting players in here via the transfer portal, to getting high school recruits in here that want, there are guys that aren't just looking for a bag, that NIL is just a data point for them. It's not all of it. So I think if you finish with anything less than that, and even as is, I think you need to improve there. But if they go 6-6, 7-5, there's a lot that needs to change, because to me that's a steep fall off from what they were last year.
It is a steep fall off, and for me, going towards the record at this point, 3 games in, and deciding what is the win-loss amount that gets him fired, to me, that's not a metric that I would prefer to use. To me, now realizing where we're at, I'd like to think more in terms of development and do we get better? Okay. I don't think that Sherrone Moore is going to be able to coach himself up a quarterback and make a quarterback that we currently have on the team into a guy that leads the Big Ten in passing. I don't think that exists, and I don't think that's on Sherrone Moore's shoulders to do that. I don't think that we have the talent, and I think he's part of it, but he's not the reason that we don't have the talent that we've had in the past across the board, across a lot of positions that we've had on offense and on defense. So to me, I needed to see growth and development throughout the year. And if we stay in the same space, my attitude's going to change. But for me, Sherrone Moore's done enough for me personally to get this season, get the opportunity to recruit a class, get the opportunity to go to the transfer portal to fill holes, get the opportunity to evaluate OCDC in a normal time frame that's not the national championship, which was brand new to them last year. To me, Sherrone Moore has earned that opportunity to go into the 2025-2026 season pretty much regardless of what happens this year. But with that being the case, there still has to be progress made from game 1 to game 12, regardless of what team you may have been dealt.
Progress is the key word there. I mean, it just has to there has to be a step forward each week. There has to be, when you look from week 1 to week, however long the season goes, you have to set yourself up for, obviously to be as successful as you possibly can be this year, but as successful as you can possibly be as a springboard into 2025 as well. I think we might end with this one. This is Michigan Go Blue 1234. He says, you think we should just start Orgy and run the ball 75% of the time a punt is better than a turnover. I think that Alex Orji at this point it's his turn. We saw Davis Warren. Davis Warren won the job, and then when push came to shove and he had to play actual games, he threw 6 interceptions. And it's not his fault. His team can't pass block, but it is his fault when your quarterback has to take care of the football. So to me, it's Alex Orji's time.
I think so. I mean, I think it's time to bring in Alex Orji. I think it's time to have Khalil Mullings, Donovan Edwards potentially in the game at the same time and give yourself a little triple option look with Alex Orji. To me, it's okay to bring Alex Orji in and be a 75% is pretty tilted, but a heavy run team, as long as you have misdirection. The problem is when you tell everybody, hey, we're going to go right there, try and stop us, and you don't have an offensive line that's dominant enough to make some holes or get some push for you. So to me, I'm good with Alex Orji coming in and trying to run our offense. I don't think he's an answer to fix all of our problems, but I think he might get some rhythm and he might get our offense on the field longer. And I agree that the turnovers are one of the biggest issues of our offense currently, regardless of what they may produce. Giving the other team extra possessions is hurting us and going to hurt us big in some of these bigger games. So I'm all for it. It's just, if we do that, we can't line up in a base formation, run the ball straight downhill with inside zone blocking and expect anything special to happen. We have to get creative in the way that we do it. I feel like you saw a little bit of that from Texas. I feel like you can watch college football pretty much anywhere where an underdog plays someone that's better than them, and you'll see some sort of scheme that is creative for the run game. And to me, that's where we need to focus and try to get better. And then the pass game is just extra dressing until we can get the run game established.
A lot to clean up for the Wolverines. A lot to clean up for us. A lot of Wi-Fi issues here this week, but that's where we're going to call it this week. Thank you to Ryan Van Bergen for his time. Thank you to audience here at Regents Field for hanging out with us. Shout out to Regents Field for hosting us every week after Michigan home games. If you want to make a reservation to come out here and hang out with us, you can do that at reservations@regentsfield.com. That's going to do it for us. Michigan wins 28-18. Moved to 2-1 on the season. It's Big Ten plate now. A lot to work on, a lot to clean up. But showdown game next week. That'll play itself into this. For the Wolverine.com. I'm Anthony Broome. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again next time.